and welcome everybody to the Sapien podcast. Thank you all for listening. We're excited. We have the amazing Sam Tejada on. Sam is a health and wellness expert and also a published author. I'm excited to announce his new book, How to Win in Modern Wellness. We're going to talk a little bit about that and kind of his journey into the healthcare space. Sam, you were just telling me a little bit about how you got into this. Can you tell everyone how you became what you've become?
Yeah, Dr. Gary, pleasure to be here, man.
Thank you.
Always good to take that nice 6-hour flight out to, California and get a lot done during that 6 hours. So, but yeah, I started in this industry when I was 19 years old. I'm 37 now. And, I actually started with Dr. Willix, who was the chief medical officer of Ketogenic. They're one of the pioneers when it came to alternative medicine. They specialize in a lot of the hormone optimization, doing the comprehensive blood work, the executive physicals. And throughout the years, he was a mentor. So I learned a lot. You're talking about a guy who was an open heart surgeon who decided to walk away from that because he got sick and tired of the traditional medicine, system. And he became a shaman and started doing a lot of more of the alternative healing, a lot of the energy healing as well, too. And, it was just a journey of learning throughout years from Dr. Willix. And that's really what brought me here to where I'm at today, where, we have several locations throughout the nation and we're really helping people get well.
Yeah, I think it's so interesting that you hear these stories of doctors that, I don't know, I think it's sort of waking up, right? It's you learn the traditional Western medicine approach, and that has its role. And I always like to emphasize that on the podcast. It's not about only alternative medicine, only energy healing, but it's about integrating all of those ideas.
Exactly.
So when I hear a story about Dr. Willix, it's so interesting because that's I think where the meaningful change can happen. Someone who can understand what the Western medicine world has to offer and then integrate all of these different interesting modalities. You have a company called Liquivita. Tell us a bit about that. I think it's so interesting. I'll let you describe it, but you're doing a lot of the same stuff that I'm doing with Evolve Healthcare.
We are. And I noticed that when I was checking out your content and stuff before I came here. And just to tell you, you hit the nail on the head about the integration between the Western and the Eastern medicine. And that's one thing that I also always say is that I never disregard traditional medicine, right? Because it's actually saved a lot of lives. But at the end of the day, if you could take a lot of this proactive, preventative approaches, right, and not need the traditional medicine, why not, So on the Liquivita side, Liquivita, when it came to fruition, where we actually started was IV vitamin therapy, where you get the vitamins, minerals, and amino acids directly into the bloodstream. Fast forward 10 years later, what we ended up doing is we actually ended up embracing a lot of the things that Dr. Willix was doing, where now we're more of the full comprehensive wellness center, where we're taking a deep dive into the patient's health.
Yeah. Let's talk about the IV therapy because I haven't had a chance to talk about it too much on the podcast. And so when I was trained, and I was starting my primary care practice, I would hear a lot of negative, oh, it's just a money-making scheme. Oh, you're making expensive urine. This is true about the whole supplement space. And then, I asked myself, I'm like, well, when a patient who's in bad shape comes into the hospital and I'm admitting them to the hospital, well, I order IV fluids. Right? And I often would add magnesium and potassium and, sometimes patients would need albumin, which is, protein. And, sometimes we'd add B vitamins, call it a banana bag.
Right.
Most famously for like the alcoholic patient, but I used it all the time for elderly, for people that are, coming in from overworking out. I mean, there's a multitude of reasons to use IV therapy. And in my practice, I found it to be extremely effective in helping people find their optimal health. It just seems like one of these things that, unless it's in the hospital making money for the hospital, it's poo-pooed. And as soon as you open a IV clinic and you start sharing different protocols, and then you get into the space of like NAD plus infusions, and there's all these different products we can provide through the IV. Oh, it's bad, it's not safe. I think it's so strange.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, have you felt that pushback? How has been, you've been doing this for a long time. How you find IV therapy to be effective? Uh, Tell us about that because I think a lot of people they're turned off to it, and it makes no sense to me why you would be.
It doesn't make sense, right? And so my background before actually going full time into Liquivita, I'm a firefighter paramedic.
Hmm.
So on the paramedic side, I got my medical background. We deal with patients with all kinds of, chronic illnesses, a lot of patients with acute illnesses. And when I got into the vitamin IV therapy space and I started learning from some of the, the OGs in the space, like Dr. Mitch Gann and Dr. Guy De Silva, rest in peace, these guys, when they were actually teaching their classes, I was sitting in there and I'm looking at everything that's going in this IV bag. I'm like, man, a lot of these different vitamins that are going into this bag are the same things that I'm giving to patients that are in certain cardiac dysrhythmias, patients that are crush injury patients, right? Sodium bicarbonate, I'm giving it to them, right? Balancing out pH balances. I'm giving adenosine monophosphate, which is part of your body's biochemistry, magnesium sulfate, calcium chloride, calcium gluconate. The, these are minerals, right? Well, these are what's classified as drugs, medications. But when you really look at it, these are vitamins. They're really just vitamins. Even B complex. These are all commercially available drugs. You can get them commercial. You can get them from McKesson. You can get it from any of these big suppliers. So only because we're taking it and we're utilizing it a little bit differently doesn't mean that it's snake oil. Your body needs this. Even during in an emergency event, it needs this.
Not only in an emergency event, but for your general wellness.
Right.
And I've been going deep dive onto supplements in general, and tell me what you think about this. So I've noticed that so one of the key things with IV therapy is bioavailability, right? When we deliver things through the vein, it's highly bioavailable. We're delivering it right where it needs to be, and then your body pumps it through you, and you're bypassing gut absorption
Right.
issues, right? Um, my thought about supplements in general, because I come from the space of nutrition, where we really promote a whole foods diet, we promote animal-based diet, we promote healthy regenerative agriculture strategies, so that we're taking care of our planet and our soil. Well, here's what I think. We've destroyed the soil. We've destroyed the planet to an extent that most people, they have some level of inflammation and illness, and the food quality is so poor. Even if you're getting the best food, the water is not as good as it used to be. The soil certainly is
Agreed.
degraded. It's so bad. So when people ask me, well, doc, you're promoting nutrition, you're promoting these healthy foods, and I'm like, yeah, but it's still not enough in 2024. You have to supplement.
I agree, 100%. And that's exactly it, right? The soil that these foods, these fruits and vegetables are being grown in, they're nutrient deficient. I call them hospitality fruits and vegetables. They look beautiful and pretty, but they don't even have flavor. You go to Costa Rica and take a bite out of a strawberry and tell me what that is. It's like it hits every single taste bud. It's funny. I was on a podcast the other day with Dr. Kendrick Haywood, and he brought it up. We were talking about the same topic, and he says, I don't even call like the vegetables I eat. I buy organic, but I don't call them organic vegetables. I said, well, why not? He says, why do we have to put descriptive words on what it's supposed to be? That's where it's gotten scary. Where it's like you go 100 years ago, no one called it an organic vegetable. It was called a vegetable, right? It's a tomato. It's a strawberry. So it's exactly what you said. It's the soil. There's no quality behind the soil. We're growing stuff in basically borderline cement. And that's what we're putting into our bodies. So we have to supplement our bodies. Our bodies need these nutrients. Your body functions off of 35 different nutrients: vitamins, minerals, amino acids, and fatty acids. If they don't have the appropriate ones, what's going to happen is chronic illness is going to eventually start to happen. It's going to start to form, and then you're going to start seeing all of these different deficiencies happen throughout the years because of the deficiencies of nutrients.
It's, I think, critical to a wellness approach is to think about all of these And minerals, right? Salt, we've vilified salt. We're giving salt water in an IV bag.
Right.
It makes you feel better because people aren't consuming enough now because we've vilified it so much. It goes deeper, and I think maybe for a different podcast, but I also think even products like sulfur have been stripped of our soil, and so I like to supplement sulfur. But anyway, I don't want to go too deep into those deficiencies because it's really a whole conversation, and I think it's just suffice to say that you know IV therapy brings a highly bioavailable source of minerals, nutrients, and other products. And like, I'm a big fan of NAD plus infusions. I know there's some
Oh, it's
controversy.
fantastic.
There's some controversy about it. What are your thoughts on it? Because I think it's an interesting topic.
So it's great. Your body needs it, right? The mitochondria. The mitochondria are your energy cells. Those cells, if you know how to regenerate those cells, that's truly the absence of disease. But we can get very deep in that. I got a lot of doctors that go to a very far extent on that mitochondria. But NAD plus, good stuff to supplement, but not everyone should get it. There's certain patients that are, have some serious issues going on that you have to correct first before you make things a little bit too hyper in their body, and then they just feel even worse.
Perfect. It's like I don't know. You're reading my mind because that's what I want to say. It's everything is not for everyone, and going to a clinic where you're provided guidance, right? Where there's a clinician that has experience with this stuff because it is not a pleasant infusion.
Right.
It's very challenging. I don't approve it for many patients. And then oftentimes when people work with me, I will guide them through basic supplementation protocols. And then that's sort of the next level approach. And a lot of people they hear about it, they jump to it, and it can cause problems. And so I think that's where the controversy lies is it's not for everyone.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Or it is for everyone once you get them to a place
That's
where
right.
it makes sense.
Well, see that's the importance of, there's a difference between just doing this like supplementing, and there's like clinics out there where you walk in and you're picking something off like a smoothie.
Yeah.
That's uh, you know, I got my opinions on that, but really when you're talking about putting something in someone's vein, you're doing a clinical treatment,
Mhm.
right? So you have to treat it as so. So what I mean by that is one of the words that we always use a phrase that's called looking under the hood. That's the
Mhm.
first thing we do. So what we want to do is dive deep into the patient's health first, and then from there start certain type of treatment regimens. So comprehensive blood analysis, looking at everything from micronutrients deficiencies, looking at your basics, your CMPs, CBCs. We're looking at autoimmune issues, food sensitivities. We're looking at hormone imbalances. We're looking at toxins that people can be exposed through, like food and environment. So for us, it's like, let's get a good bird's eye view so we do give the person the right treatment plan. When you're talking about IV nutrition, you give a patient high dose vitamin C, well, you better hope you're checking a G6 PD before you do that. God forbid if they have,
Deficiency.
deficiency
Yeah.
in G6 PD, you're going to cause hemolysis of those cells. You could kill the person. So these are the things with IV nutrients that have to be considered before you actually start doing these treatments. You can't just go ahead and put it on a smoothie menu. Just that doesn't work.
Yeah, I hate the smoothie menu approach. I think it makes sense from a business, and I think that's an interesting part of what we should talk about is you're a businessman ultimately, right? This is a big company. You guys have lots of clinics all over the country. You have IV clinics, you have wellness centers. What's your guys' approach with the wellness center? Is that someone coming in, they're seeing a physician, they're getting that comprehensive blood work assessment, and then you guys are giving them a protocol? Can you describe what that looks like a little bit?
Yeah, so the wellness centers, it is a comprehensive approach. So first step is they come in. Everyone usually has either a goal or a problem that they're trying to solve. So what we're doing first is we're trying to get to know our patients. So we're doing a lifestyle assessment and questionnaire. We want to know exactly what they do on a day-to-day basis. Do they exercise? Do they eat? Are they smoking? Are they eating? Like, what are they exposed to? Are you a cop? Are you a firefighter? Are you being exposed to chemicals, carcinogens? Are you at the shooting range and getting exposed to lead? And that's probably why you got that brain fog that's going on. So for us, it's like really taking that deep dive and understand the person first. So once we do that lifestyle assessment and questionnaire, that's where we're going to the next step, where now we're going and we're diving on the, looking under the hood. We're diving in that area. So what does that consist of? All right, we're going to do a body composition analysis. So we start off with the in-body assessment, and we're also doing the DEXA scan same day. Reason why we do them both the same day, they're giving us pretty much the same data. DEXA scan is a lot more accurate. Is that the DEXA scan, we can only do it due to the Board of Health only once every 3 months. So we use the in-body to trend their program on a weekly basis, when they come and do their weigh-ins. So some people ask us like, well, why don't you just have them get on a scale at home? Well, scale tells me total weight. It's not giving me true body composition analysis where we're looking at intracellular, extracellular, lean mass, visceral fat, which that's one of my favorite ones. Looking at adipose fat. So we're looking at the body composition analysis. Then we're going to go ahead and do the VO2 max, which VO2 max, a lot of different benefits. We're looking at endurance, cardiovascular, and also we could calculate fat burning zones for the patient. It's also a great tool to look and see for mitochondrial function. And then we have our RMR, which is the resting metabolic rate, where we can see exactly how many calories they're burning at a rested state. And then customize part of their program like nutrition and macros and micros that they're going to take. And then we're doing the blood work, which in the blood work goes through what I mentioned earlier, where we do epigenetic testing.
Wow.
We're doing, all the other things, your typical kidney function,
Yeah.
liver function, hormones, and hormones, we're diving deep into that as well too. So from there, getting all of that data, the person's personal data, and then setting up a treatment plan. It's not, hey, come in, you want to get on a weight loss program, which, there's things that have become very popular, like the Ozempic and stuff, which do work, right? But what we want to do is let's actually figure out what's going on with the person before we just start jumping to any of these programs or any of these medications.
It's the dream setup. It's what I tried to mimic. So I have a traditional primary care practice that's insurance based. I can't do all that stuff. Like just realistically, and I think it's fun for people that are listening to think about that, right? A lot of listeners are my patients, right? And a lot of people can't afford this stuff. It is pricey. The dream, I think these conversations, the dream is to make people aware, because ultimately, if insurance companies and if the health industry were to embrace everything you just mentioned, I was taking notes. Everything you just mentioned is something that I've done a deep dive on and I'm obsessed with and wish I could offer, right?
Of course.
I wish these things were part of a general health assessment. They're not, right? I can do a questionnaire. I can do blood work. I do a lot of blood work that other doctors don't do. That's probably part of your comprehensive panel. But, to have a DEXA machine, to be able to measure the VO2 max, to have the bandwidth to do all that, to then have time to integrate it, to then have time to educate a patient on what all these things mean. It's very challenging. And I think what you're describing is like the platform for what real healthcare looks like,
Yeah.
I'm assuming that's what's in your book.
Yeah, I mean, really, that's what we're all diving deep in the book and talking about. In the book, all those faces that you see there in the book, those are a bunch of leaders in the industry. So what I've done in the 10 years that I started Liquivita, I built strong relationships with other CEOs, doctors that are, leading the industry, and they all have a chapter in the book and talking about how they're doing it. And really that's it is, when we look at traditional medicine is we've gone into like this fast-paced treatment model where physicians are only given like 7 minutes to see their patients. Like, what can you really get done in 7 minutes? So, when you start looking at some, good functional medicine doctors that are going through these assessments and sitting with their patients, they're spending hours during that consultation with the patient. I mean, that's how deep they're going into that patient's health.
That's what it takes to give real meaningful, but it also, you don't have to do that. Like that's a dream, sort of an ideal setup.
Right.
There's a lo-fi version of this. I think what I try to do is find that balance of what can I do in a reasonable amount of time. It's not super lucrative. My clinic is not super lucrative. I say that all the time because people should know if you're running a primary care practice with an insurance model, if your doctor is doing that and spending time with you, you're very lucky.
You're very lucky.
And if they're talking to you about any of the stuff we're just talking about, they're working hard to provide that care. It's very, very challenging. But if more patients knew about it, right? If people listen to this and they sort of connect with it and ask that of their physicians and ask that of the system over time, of course, I do think that a lot of this stuff is going to get cheaper, it's going to get easier to do, and it's going to be more possible to integrate.
And that's actually my goal is, when I was working with Ketogenics, it was for the most affluent. And I would go to these big multi-million dollar homes and I would see people transform their lives. I would go to their homes every 3 months for about 8 years. I was doing that on my days off from the fire department. And I would always tell myself, like, why isn't this available for the regular person that looks like me? So when I started Liquid Vita and actually started implementing all of these different, executive physicals, if you will, my goal is to bring it to the masses and make sure that it's affordable. And we're doing that. That's what we're doing with Liquid Vita.
That's amazing. I got to learn more about Liquid Vita. We're going to talk after the podcast.
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'll go. This is what I vibe on.
Yeah.
Right? So, you ask all the doctors in the world of functional medicine, I'm always talking to them. I'm hanging out with them. I'm doing content with them. Because for me, it's like we in the world of functional medicine, we can't sit here and all start saying the same thing, talking about we want to change the course of medicine, but then not work together as one voice. Like, if we really care about that, well, we have to collaborate together. We have to work together. You're learning things that, our doctors are learning something different, and you got to share that information. That's the only way that we're going to progress. There's not a lot of strong clinical studies on some of the stuff we're doing. There's more case studies than anything else. So when you start sharing those case studies and you start seeing what's working for this doctor and then you start doing it and it's working for you, that's it, man. You're getting your answers right there.
And speaking to that, it's not about I'm right and they're wrong, right? It's not this or that. And also, it's not about being anchored to evidence-based medicine for as the holy grail that I was sold in medical school and training that it is, because 99% of research studies are now funded by drug companies. Should be mentioned. I probably mention it every episode. I'm going to keep mentioning it because I love evidence-based medicine. I wish it was more of a pure science. It's not anymore. Since the year 2000, it's all bought and purchased by drug companies. It's very expensive to do it. I had a great conversation with Dr. Ben Bickman, who's like a foundational researcher, a biochemical researcher, and he's putting out paper after paper after paper about sort of the effects of low carbohydrate diet, intermittent fasting, the health benefits of healthy fat consumption, and I'm integrating it in real time.
Right.
Like a lot of the functional medicine doctors you're working with, they're looking at research that's coming out, case studies, foundational research from universities, and they're not waiting for the guidelines to change in 20 years because they want to help people today. And so that's what we're here talking about, is how do you help people today? You gather all of this information that you mentioned and you make the best course of action forward. You cannot just rely on guidelines by alphabet organizations.
Yeah.
You're stuck. It's impossible to move forward, and ultimately most of those organizations are just going to wait until they can monetize this thing.
Exactly.
Right? And so ultimately it's still about that. I want to talk about a couple of the things you mentioned because it's really interesting. Visceral fat. You got excited about visceral fat. I'm excited about visceral fat.
It's to me, it's like it's the one that's hiding, right? You get people that look normal. They get on that machine, on the DEXA, and boom, it's a high level of visceral fat. And if you get high levels of visceral fat, that's indicative of cardiovascular disease, other chronic illnesses like diabetes that can, go into that. You might already have it, So it's one of the ones that a little bit harder to treat and correct. But I've had guys that I've worked with in the fire department. I've had friends that you would think that are in decent shape, and they get on there and that visceral fat level, that percentage is pretty high. And that's a ticking time bomb, So for me, it's let's figure that out because, me growing up or even my parents, they've never got that test before. They never knew until I actually put Liquid Vita together. They had no clue what their visceral fat percentage was.
What machine do you use to measure it?
The DEXA scan.
The DEXA scan. Yeah, because I had a colleague who was really encouraging me to order MRIs on patients.
Okay.
For that, because it's probably more sensitive than a DEXA, but it's very difficult to get approved, to get done. I think visceral fat is interesting because we have this battle about obesity, right? We have a normalization of obesity in our society. And then we have people saying, well, not every obese person is unhealthy. And I'm like, okay, that's probably true. I'm like, but not every skinny person is healthy,
Right.
right? So it's not that simple, right?
Right.
Like, and when we talk about visceral fat, we're basically saying internal obesity, the obesity on your organs, the fat that's accumulating around your heart and your liver and your kidneys, and that is toxic,
Very toxic.
and that is associated with all of the medical
Yeah.
problems.
So you know the InBody, which is a cheaper device, but it's pretty darn accurate. That also calculates visceral fat percentage. The most accurate is going to be the DEXA though. So, but
Compared to MRI, do you know?
let's say that again.
Compared to like an MRI.
I mean, so the MRI or PET scan, those are very accurate,
Yeah.
but it's a lot more
Oh
expensive.
my God, yeah.
That's like the true executive physical,
Right.
which some of our doctors will actually go refer people to go out and have a radiologist do the report review and sit with our doctors and whatnot.
And maybe there's like a version of it where you have one of these more like approachable or accessible devices.
Yeah.
And if you get red flag findings, maybe that.
Then you send
yeah,
them
you
off,
send them
right,
to the MRI.
imaging center or something.
That's
right.
the next level thing that I want to get into. I think visceral fat is critical, especially in certain populations. You have like Southeast Asian populations where they have terrible diabetes and they never get obese, they never get fat because their fat cells, everyone has different fat cells. You can have hypertrophy, you can have hyperplasia, and again, probably I've talked about it before, so we'll leave that part out, but it is that nuanced, right? Health is that nuanced, and it takes that kind of understanding. And for the record, I didn't learn any of this in medical school, and I'm an internal medicine, so I went through high-level internal medicine training. None of this was mentioned.
That's crazy to hear that. And if anything between a DO versus a MD, you would get more of that training than most of the MDs, from what I hear, because obviously I haven't been through the training. Now, let me ask you this: what about the training in regards to like understanding the body's biochemistry, all of your pathways, your metabolic pathways, Krebs cycle? How deep did you guys get into that in medical school?
Yeah, it's interesting. There is a divide between foundational science and clinical medicine. So in medical school, you learn these biochemical pathways, and it's very esoteric. It's very like, memorize the cycle. And they do talk about ATP, and they do talk about NAD+. They
Right.
do, it's there. I mean, I have these strong memories of like memorizing the pathways, right? But when you get to clinical medicine, which is completely divorced from the basic
It
science,
doesn't connect.
no, in fact, they never connect it. And
That's
it-
crazy.
I feel like the education's a bit bought in that way because, when I first started in, you can call it functional medicine, wellness, integrative medicine. When I first started it, the thing that got me was ketogenic diet. That was my first step. And I read this book called The Big Fat Surprise by Nina Teicholz.
Okay.
And that basically, she told the story of how we got into this battle of like fat versus carbs, whatever. And she's a brilliant writer, a brilliant scientist. And she explained the historical story to me. And then, I thought about ketogenic diets and I thought about nutrition through the lens of biochemistry. And I was like, well, of course this is healthy. Of course we should sometimes be in ketosis. Of course eating carbs 5 times a day is going to be toxic. Of course. Because if you think back to first, second year of med school, the body doesn't work. When you think about omega-3 fatty acids and the importance of cholesterol and hormone synthesis and brain synthesis and skin, all of it, right? Of course, we know that. They taught it to us, but they separate it so much that unless you seek to integrate those two kind of batches of information in your brain, you're not taught about a ketogenic diet as an intervention.
Right.
You're actually vilified that it's dangerous somehow. That's the only thing I ever heard when I was in internal medicine residency. Maybe that's different now because the last 5-6 years you've really seen a shift in our thinking about nutrition. But I don't actually know in the education setting if they've changed. But that's the answer. They separate it. They teach you the science that we know, and then they teach you the clinical guidelines that exist. And I don't actually think they're delayed. I just think that look, the top donators to medical education are food companies. That's public knowledge. You can look that
Right.
up.
Right.
So why are you even letting food companies donate to medical school? You know that their goal is to sell more food, not to make healthy and smart physicians, right? You know what their goal is. And so to me, the guidelines, most of the guidelines is built to teach you how to treat a disease, but they are not taught how to do disease prevention or anything that will actually reverse disease.
Right.
So I reverse type 2 diabetes on a regular basis. In
Amazing.
my life, it's a normal thing. It's like every day in clinic, I'm pulling diabetes meds. It's pretty popular in the social media space. I learned from social media doctors, like, right?
Right. Right.
It's pretty like a lot of these folks that you've learned from have been doing this for decades. It's nothing new.
Yeah.
But if I go to my when I was in the hospital and I was presenting like ketogenic research, everyone but one doctor looked at me like I was crazy.
Wow.
And I'm like, why? I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying, look at this science, look at this research, look at this idea that connects to biochemistry. And it's just like, no, people won't do that. They won't change their diet. How do you know they won't? There's a huge disconnect between science, like bench research and like lab research, and clinical medicine.
And for me, the part is, it's like when you really start looking at the body's biochemistry and you're looking at all of these different cycles, and you're looking at ADP production, NAD, serotonin, dopamine, and you're looking at how all of these nutrients affect the Krebs cycle and everything else. That is the science. And I say that's the difference between the traditional medicine versus functional medicine, is that functional medicine is going deep into that. And Dr. Willix, I remember Dr. Willix would always tell me, he said, Sam, he had in his office a big biochemistry with all the pathways, with all the, that look like all these different circles and lines and everything else. He says, when you find a physician that can understand this off the top of their head, that's the guy who can reverse disease. And he always said, he says, the trick to reversing disease is epigenetics, nutrient supplementation, and peptide therapy. He says, I guarantee you that you can reverse disease with all three of those. And I love him because that's how I got into the business. And I remember going to one of the big presentations. He would teach doctors all over the world. He was teaching with the AMMG. There was about 1,000 doctors in this auditorium room. And he told me before he went on stage, he said, Sam, you're going to see about at least 30 doctors. After I talk for about 2 to 3 minutes, they're going to get out of their seat and they're not going to come back. I said, what? He started talking. And for those first 2 to 3 minutes, he started talking about the Krebs cycle. So there's some people out there, they don't want to hear it. They don't want to go back into that. But that is like the science behind functional medicine, is going deep into those things. Seeing how people methylate, MTHFR. That's all part of that. You have to understand it if that's what you're going to be treating your patients, understand what's happening inside of their body, how the drugs are reacting to their body and everything else. You have to.
You have to be willing to continue to learn. I think
Yes.
there's, for me, I love methylation. I've been talking about that a lot. For me, I say this to my friends all the time. I'm not that smart. I mean, I'm as smart as any other doctor, and I believe most of the doctors are very intelligent people. But we're trained to be closed-minded. And so I think the real trick is to remain open-minded. Every year of practice, every month of practice, I add another chip to this stack of information that I'm learning. I take all of the stuff I learned in med school, all of the clinical practice I learned in internal medicine residency, and now a decade of clinical practice. And every year I'm adding. I'm not saying, oh, I know this, so that's wrong. I'm never doing that. I'm never saying this or that. I'm always saying this and that. I'm always adding to it because, we're very complicated. And our environment is increasingly toxic. Right? It's way more toxic in 2024 than when I started my training in my my practice in 2013 and my training back in 2009. You know what I mean? Like,
Right.
it's getting worse. And so it's about adding and adding and adding. And then there's another part of it where they will sell you an idea, and then publicly that idea is discredited, and they will not go back and re-educate, right? They'll just
Right.
sort of move on. The most recent example is that antidepressants, the SSRI, the mechanism of action was disproven. I mean, they don't work. They don't work the way I was taught, and it's not like a big deal. There was a big article, I think, in the New York Times, and then moving on.
I remember that.
Like moving on, and that was a few years ago. But it was like moving on, and I'm like, well, hold on.
Let's go a little deeper on this.
Yeah, like, hold on, and then we talk about the gut-brain axis and how important nutrition is, and then you talk about like toxins like glyphosate destroying our bodies and our guts and our food, and it's like, well, why aren't we talking more about that?
Right.
Why aren't those the news articles that are out there? Well, because who's paying for the news articles?
Exactly.
And so I don't want to get deplatformed, but who is paying for the news media?
Someone's controlling the narrative.
I mean, we're not talking about politics. We are talking about health.
Your health.
Your
Right.
health. This is foundational. Yeah, I was having a funny conversation with my friends this morning, and we were like, we always like banter about politics, but I don't know anything about politics. I just say funny stuff that I heard on TV or whatever because
Right.
it's funny. But when it comes to nutrition and drugs, food and drugs, I know about that, and I'm
Right.
like, they're not even talking about. Forget about it's omission. They're not lying. They're just omitting all of it, and then you're left to just guess, or seek out podcasts like this
Right.
one and books like this one, and unless you seek it out, you're just going to be ill.
Exactly. And that's where the power of being self-taught. There's the thing is now it's like there's so much information out there where it's if people really want to take care of their health, like you can find it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
But it's also confusing because you mentioned a really interesting approach. You said peptides, supplementation,
Epigenetics.
epigenetics, so
nutrient
environment,
supplement,
right?
yeah.
So what I find is that, especially with the information and social media and stuff, people get stuck on one thing.
Right.
So there's like the peptides guy. And then I came from the world of nutrition, so it's like the animal-based people or the plant-based people.
Yeah.
And then the animal or the nutrition people, they won't accept that supplementation is essential. And then people doing supplements are like, oh, well, I don't know about peptides. And when people doing peptides are the key to everything. And I'm like, well, it's probably all the
All of them.
things.
You got to bring them together. And that's where you need like a very strong group and powerful group of doctors that specialize in these different areas. Like if you just find one doctor who's like the jack of all trades, there's no such thing. You got to find like in the world of functional medicine, you'll find the guy who focuses on gut health. You'll find the guy who focuses on cardiovascular health. You'll find the guy who focuses on just metabolic health. Period. So there's organizations, accredited organizations that have these guys there, like the A4M, the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. There's a lot of people that are specializing in these different areas. But exactly what you said, it's like you start hearing too much of just one thing, and it's not just that one thing. And I've seen it on social media a lot, like Gary Brecka. There's people that are like trying to eat him alive. Like, the guy's a human biologist. He's not a doctor. I've even seen doctors try to eat him alive. It's like, you're the doctor. You got to figure it out. He's not the doctor. He's doing his part on what he specializes in. Shit, you go ahead and do the research on, the cardiac part or the stomach part. He's doing his part and helping a lot of people out. So for me, it's just like, there isn't just one guy who's going to do it all. It's a mixture of bringing people together, bringing that one strong voice, right? But getting these experts to really look into the different areas of what's going on and then correcting it.
I love that.
Yeah.
There's the epigenetic part is interesting. So that's this environmental effect, right? So do you guys do any education or work? I think you mentioned something about doing breath work. I don't know. Like I think I talk a lot about with my patients about like behavioral environmental things. I think getting that sun exposure in the morning,
The first light.
the first
I
light,
love that.
having the evening routine, and not just avoiding sunlight, but the full evening routine, a thoughtful way of winding down. I think breath work is so essential. Wim Hof saved my life.
Yeah.
in medical school and residency. Without him and his teachings, I don't know if I would have gone through without, and I never had to start an antidepressant. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
so many. Do you guys, is that part of, I know that's part of probably your life, or is that part of your,
That's part of my life. Like I do that, and we try to tell people that they should learn about it and understand it. And there's different podcasts, and there's different apps and stuff that help you like do guided breath work. I did breath work with Gary Breck. I had the opportunity. We did content on it and everything. And I use breath work. I try to do it every morning to begin with, right? It makes me feel a little bit more sharp throughout the day. I feel more energetic. I feel focused. And one of the times that I love to use breath work most of the time is when I start getting a little worked up, right? When I start getting a little anxious, something's going on, not in the way that it's supposed to go. And then I just start doing a little bit of guided breath work, and I go through it, and I just, I wear my Aura ring. So my Aura ring tells me everything. Like it tells me how my, whenever I start going, like getting a little anxious or whatever, I'll start looking at the diagram at the end of the day. I'm like, man, this thing is just so smart. So breath work helps a lot. It really does.
and you mentioned the Aura ring. I consider sleep more important than all the stuff we just talked about. We just talked, whatever, 30
Sleep
minutes.
data. Yeah.
Number one, most important thing is sleep.
Sleep. That's where you recover.
That's where your brain heals.
Mitochondria heals.
I mean, you clear the toxins that will cause dementia later. The famous saying of you sleep when you're dead. Well, you'll be dead a lot quicker if you don't sleep.
Yep.
Do you guys do anything like that in your wellness centers, or you haven't touched on it yet?
So yeah, we do certain things to help with sleep. We have a few different peptides that help with sleep, but we do put a lot of emphasis on the importance of sleeping. So after I retired from the fire department, I told myself I'm never waking up to an alarm clock. I don't wake up to an alarm clock. I only sleep about 4.5 to 5 hours max. My body naturally wakes up. But I'm a biohacker. So, I do my red light therapy. I take my NAD injections. I do everything you can think of. So, and plus I get all my data. I have my wearables, and I see exactly how deep I go into my sleep, my REM cycle, how long was it. I look at my readiness score on my Oura ring, and I'm ready to go. I just feel sharp as a tack. I'm big into brain health also, which has a huge relation to how you sleep as well.
Yeah, I think one of the most underdiagnosed syndromes in medicine is sleep apnea. I think it's so prevalent and underappreciated. And I have a lot of patients that use the Oura ring, and we start identifying those issues. And you could see it in the blood work, elevated hemoglobin levels from chronic hypoxia at night, inflammatory marker elevations. And you're like, why? I'm doing everything. I'm like, how's your sleep?
Yeah.
It's so foundational.
Do you run them through like a sleep study at all, or you just go based off the wearables?
Yeah, I work with a dentist, so it's funny too. A lot of, I have, like yourself, I have mentors, right? People that have opened my eyes to little parts of it. And like I said, I started with nutrition, and then I have these two dentists. I've had them on, Dr. Gould, Dr. Gabe, and they're really, really into this stuff. They're a little older than me. So they came to me, and so they do sleep restoration with me. So we talk about appropriate supplementation strategies. We're always talking about different strategies. Vitamin D repletion, like at the most basic level, if you're not checking your vitamin D and replacing it with K2 and doing it right and measuring your levels. Like, this is basic foundation for us. But like in my primary care practice, I mean, that's 20-30% of what I'm talking about. And they're like, why are you so crazy about it? I'm like, no, you don't understand. This is like a hormone deficiency you have.
It is.
This is, forget about all these crazy, interesting tests. Your vitamin D is 20. And they're saying that the normal is 30. Normal is 50.
Yeah, you got to get it up there.
You got to get it up there. They're even giving normals on the blood work that are inappropriate. And I always telling people, like, I interpret blood work differently. I care differently about your LDL. I care about the HDL triglyceride ratio. That's what I'm looking at. Looking at your fasting insulin and your CRP, and I'm looking at your hemoglobin and your MCV levels and RDW and all these things. Everything I just mentioned, not from med school or training, just for the record. But anyway, I work with this dentist. He has a clinic close to me, and I generally refer to him. Why? Because he gets to look at the airway. He gets to look at the teeth grinding patterns.
Oh
He likes
wow,
to
yeah.
look at the uvula and the oropharynx in a way that's even better than like an anesthesiologist or a sleep doctor, because he's looking at thousands and thousands of airways.
Right.
And we use a watch pat device,
Okay.
which is just there's a bunch of different products. This is a great product. It's like, it has a monitor on your finger, a monitor on your chest, and then you get a report right in the morning that goes to a sleep center with a sleep doctor who reads it. We get a report, and then we can create guidance. Sometimes people can get away with supplementation and behavior changes. Sometimes we do an oral appliance, right? So this is like a mouth appliance. And sometimes someone needs to do a CPAP.
Oh, machine. Right.
Yeah. So it depends. And some people can't tolerate one or the other, but at the very least, and you can start making modifications.
Like at the end of the day, if you have sleep apnea and you're able to correct it, I don't care who you are, you're gonna feel fantastic. You're gonna feel more energetic throughout the day. You're not gonna be so foggy minded. It's just, I mean, that is, if you have that, you need to make certain changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's not always the obese person.
Right.
People always think about, there's certain anatomies, jaw anatomies, neck anatomies, and also it's like vitamin deficiencies in utero that get affected your anatomy as you're growing. And it's a wild thing to learn about so late in my career. I mean, I'm not late in my career, but it feels late. I'm like, well, how did you guys not even talk about vitamin D? It's so basic and foundational to what I do. And B vitamins, I promote, like, most of my patients in fact, all my patients should be taking B vitamins, and I just give people methylated B vitamins if they're willing to buy it, because people have methylation problems. Whatever your MTHFR status is, well, the methylated vitamin is often more bioavailable, and you're going to buy, you can't change your genetics anyway. So like, I'm really big on methylated B vitamins.
Yeah. I mean, B vitamins are extremely important, and you start really looking at something as simple as B1, right? B1, well, the effects that it has, and we actually use it in traditional medicine too, right? With patients that were hungover, or the thiamine, and you put it into the banana bag. Diabetic patients, who go into a diabetic coma, we would use thiamine after we give the intravenous glucose. So all of this stuff has a purpose. Like, your body needs it. It's part of your body, so when you're deficient in it, that's where it might not be an emergency right then and there, but there are things that should be supplemented and corrected. If you can't get it through foods, get it supplemented.
Folic acid is your prenatal, right? That's what's going to prevent nuchal cord issues. That is in your B vitamin. I consider that a B vitamin. It's in the complex. I provide that as a methylated product, highly bioavailable. And if you have a mutation or not, that's going to be the right product for you. All this stuff is important. So before we run out of time, I'm excited to read the book. I did not. You just shared this with me when we came. So what can readers expect from it? Like, what is the goal? What is your goal? I mean, other than promoting, obviously, your large company that's promoting this amazing approach.
Yeah, so the book was put together for both medical providers that are thinking about stepping out of the traditional system and kind of don't know which route to go and how people have done it. So it gives you a lot of peace of mind to kind of hear what everyone has done in the years of them doing it. So you have an idea and understand you're not the only one who's trying to figure it out. But then for the actual consumer, it gives you more of an idea of all of these different services and modalities that are out there when it comes to the alternative medicine space and biohacking, and understanding, like, the ability to track, these different results that you're going through. And I think a lot of the stuff that we're doing, a lot of stuff we do at our clinics and that you do in your clinics, for me, it's kind of becoming more commercialized, if you will. But, I'm dealing with some doctors that are going even to a whole nother level, which is bioquantum, and doing, frequency work. And that's just at a whole nother level. But give it about 5 to 10 years, everything we're doing now is going to, quote my words on this, it's going to switch, because it's all about frequency. It's all about frequency. And when you start looking at the mitochondria, you're going to start understanding that it is your connection. It's your connection through frequency to the universe. Sounds crazy,
Doesn't sound
but
crazy to me.
that's what it is.
I mean, look, I think my first episode of this season was about energy, and I'm like, you guys are gonna think I'm crazy, but I think energy and feeling that energy, and you're talking about actually measuring that energy is critical. In a similar vein, I think when it comes to mental health, I think psychedelic medicine is the future, at least as far as a pharmaceutical type intervention goes. And I think psychedelic medicine paired with therapy, especially people that are sensitive to energy, people that are trained in that kind of approach. I think that's where we can start really helping people snap out of this post-COVID fog and anxiety and
Oh yeah.
fear. And and I think the future is bright, assuming they don't, marginalize and trivialize alternative medicine practitioners and try to embrace it. I hope. You see a lot of, I think I see positive signs of this stuff coming to light.
I do too. And like recently, I was appointed as a chairman of the association of the American IV Association, where we have a bunch of founding members, which are a lot of the guys on that on the cover of that book, and then a lot of other people that are also leading great healthcare companies in the alternative medicine space that we've all collectively have gotten together, and where we've put together a scientific advisory board, and we're going to start running gathering a lot of the data that we've all collected and putting it together and putting something out of getting something out of that. So I think throughout the next few years, you're going to start seeing what we're doing move forward a little bit more aggressive. And I think there's going to be a lot of great people that I'm going to put you in contact with also that you're going to be able to vibe with. And I'm not a doctor. I'm a guy who kind of just like has a passion for this. I do have a bit of a medical background as a paramedic, but I know some of the guys that I have, including my business partner, Dr. Christopher Davis, who took over for Dr. Willix once he passed away. So Dr. Davis is an interventional cardiologist who stepped away from traditional medicine. And now he's one of the leading doctors in the space of functional medicine, and he's my partner. And I actually would love for you to actually go at it with him, and I think you guys are going to geek out on it. You guys are going to love it. That's a show that I'm going to watch.
Heck yeah. Thank you. I don't know, an amazing conversation. Listen, Sam, thank you. If people want to reach out to you, where can they find your book? If they want to, check out your clinics, where can they find that? Maybe you can share that with everyone.
So the book, you can find that on Amazon. I actually just a few days ago hit Amazon's top seller, so I feel pretty good about that in 3 different categories, healthy living and a few other ones. So I'm excited about that. So you can find the book there. You can find me on Instagram. It's Sammy, SAMMY_Tejada. And then Liquavita is our company. That's liquavita.com. And you can find all of our facilities around the nation.
Amazing. Sam, thank you for your time. Thank you for flying out here and spending your time with us. Thank you all for listening. And until next time, goodbye.